Hello and welcome to this Lean Construction Ireland webinar. My name is Derek Sinnott. I'm Executive Director with Lean Construction Ireland, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this Lean Construction Ireland webinar. Today we're joined by Holly Robinson. Holly is a consultant at Vision Consulting, specialising in commitment-based management to support teams in delivering their promises and improving on-site coordination. She's worked with organisations including Scottish Water, Severn Trent, MWH Treatment, and the HSE. Here she's been helping frontline teams make clear commitments, track progress visibly, and build trust. She's passionate about making work more accountable, collaborative, and energised by shared purpose, which is very interesting. In this session, Holly will be sharing her insights about delivering projects faster with commitment-based management. Really looking forward to the follow-up conversation with Holly, and we'll move into that deeper conversation after the presentation, where we'll look at the practical challenges, the lessons learned, and future opportunities. So you don't want to miss this. Looking forward to getting started, and I'm going to hand straight over to Holly. Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, Derek, for that introduction. I'll just dive right into it. Let me pull up my presentation. And then... Okay. See that okay?
There you go. Yep. Good.
Brilliant. Okay. So like Derek said, I'm going to be talking through how Vision as a company deliver projects faster, particularly construction and capital infrastructure projects with commitment-based management, which is our specialty, our bread and butter. So just a quick intro to Vision and who we are. So we're an independent transformation consultancy. Like I said, we specialize in project delivery, partner alignment, and specifically behavioral change. Like that, we focus mainly on capital and infrastructure projects, and our core methodology is commitment-based management. So I'll get into what commitment-based management is in a little bit. So I wanted to start off the presentation by just highlighting some of the key issues that probably won't be new to anyone, but that we always see on these construction projects. So delivery partners misaligned and distrust between the delivery partners, missed or unclear commitments, one that I'm sure everyone's very comfortable with and uncomfortable with, firefighting instead of this proactive planning. We see a lot of silos instead of synergy and people working together. Obviously, we see projects being delayed as a result of all the things I've just said. And with that, we see a lot of the trust between those delivery partners, between companies and their customers. We see that trust just completely eroded due to those delays. And an interesting one, which I'll touch on a little bit more as well, is we see a lot of unproductive moods and unproductive meetings. So what we say when we go into a project is, everyone wants to come in and do a good job. Everyone has great intentions, but a lot of the time the system doesn't support these great commitments that people want to make. So, like I said, commitment-based management was developed after extensive research in association with Stanford Department of Computer Science, Berkeley Department of Philosophy, the Kellogg School of Management, and London Business School. So it's fairly grounded in a lot of academics. And what we basically claim is that organizations work best when managers and leaders guide the actions with distinct personal and actionable commitments and promises made to the owners, other managers, employees, and obviously customers. So we say that this can only happen when managers and leaders take responsibility for the quality, the negotiation and coordination and fulfillment of these commitments. So what we do is we assist organizations, teams, and individuals to design great commitments aligned to delivering the organization's promise to its customers. And we develop new organizational practices that we embed when we go in on a project to create a culture of keeping and monitoring commitments consistently over time. So one of our tools, and this is kind of at the core of commitment-based management, is this thing called the conversation loop. So what we say is that every single interaction between two people can fit into this conversation loop. It's split into 4 quadrants, and what we have in the middle are conditions of satisfaction. So I'll briefly talk through this. What we say, quadrant 1, which is a really important quadrant, and a lot of people kind of fast track through this quadrant into the second one, is preparation. So this is when someone's making a request or making an offer. And the key aspect of quadrant 1 is listening. So what you'll have is a customer, and this is the person who's either making the request or asking for an offer to be made to them, and then the performer who fulfills it. So they'll sit there, they'll ask something, and what we say is that it's kind of a spectrum. So if you're a really good customer, when you're making that request, you'll be really specific. You'll say, you know, instead of "can you make me a cup of tea," you'll say, "can you make me a cup of tea in my favorite mug with this amount of milk and 2 spoons of sugar?" So that's what the difference there in the request is quite clear. You won't always have a really good customer. So we say this is where the kind of spectrum comes into it. If you're a really good performer and someone asks you for a cup of tea, it's the listening that you want to tune into. So you'll say, "Oh, what mug do you want it in? Do you take milk? Do you take sugar? How much?" So it's that sort of back and forth of, okay, someone has made something that looks like a request here, but let's dive deeper into what they really mean. So that's quadrant 1. And we say that's really, really important. A lot of our projects, what we'll say is for the first 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, even if it's a longer project, we'll just constantly say in quadrant 1, we'll listen, we'll ask the questions, we'll try and really get detail of what someone is asking for. Quadrant 2 is where everyone's comfortable. This is kind of negotiating back and forth a little bit. So the performer will either make a promise to you and say, "I will get you that cup of tea, promise I'll get you that cup of tea in 5 minutes," or they'll say, "Can't, sorry, decline the offer. I've no kettle or no tea bags," or whatever it is. They can counter offer and say, "I'm really busy at the minute. I'll come back and make your cup of tea in half an hour." Or they'll commit and say, "I can't right now. Could I come back in 4 hours and blah, 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 make your cup of tea then?" And then the customer as well in this stage of negotiation can just say, "Actually, do you know what? Forget about it. I'll just withdraw this request." I am oversimplifying a little bit, but it's easier to talk it through a cup of tea. I do have actual construction examples in the following slide, but just to get the basis of this in something really simple. Performance then is normally people just skip the first 2 phases, then they just jump straight into action. So quadrant 3 is the action quadrant. It's you do the request that's been made of you, or you do the offer that you're going to do. There's nothing really to say in that. It's where the action is. And then quadrant 4, again, which is often missed and something that we really strive to embed in our projects, is this acknowledgement phase. So you declare whether or not you're satisfied or you're dissatisfied. So again, back to this sort of spectrum, a good customer will tell the performer whether or not they're satisfied with what's been done. "It's a lovely cup of tea, thank you so much." Or if they don't, a good performer, "Is that cup of tea all right? Were you happy with it? Are you satisfied with it?" And in the middle, condition satisfaction, that's the sort of stuff that I'm talking about in your milk, your sugar. When it comes to construction projects, obviously it's slightly different, but it's those key things that a customer wants that create this really useful request that has no ambiguity. Everyone knows what they're doing. So that's kind of our conversation loop. And like I said, I've used a cup of tea example there, but it can be applied to absolutely any and all conversations and any request that anyone makes from you. So whenever we're doing anything, we always bring it back to the loop. So like I said, here's some actual examples that aren't just a cup of tea. So how we see this showing up on the ground, and both commitment-based management and the loop. So customers articulating their concerns, thinking together about possible ways of taking care of those concerns. So, they'll make a statement and say, "I'm really worried we're not going to get this project done on time." A good performer will ask, "Why? What are you worried about? What's showing up for you?" Exploring that assessment, "I don't think the project is going to get done on time," is key to what we try and embed in these projects. So when someone makes that sort of declaration, when someone makes that statement, asking them to expand on it, asking them to talk more about it, that's really key. And like it says there, particularly when those assessments are different to what you think. So you might be sitting there thinking, yeah, well, what's he talking about? I think the project's fine. And a lot of people will just leave it at that. They'll just say like, right, he has a different opinion to me. But what we're really pushing is to dive into, when someone makes an assessment like that, why they think like that. Making clear requests and offers. So like I said back in the previous slide, we coach a lot on how to make a clear request. And it's a practice, it's a skill that people, it's not natural to us to go into such detail when we make a request. And we also might think that, you know, the person sitting in front of me knows exactly what I want, but they don't. And a lot of the time that's where like coordination waste comes in. So really being clear on those requests, and similarly making clear offers to your customer if there's something you can do. Negotiating effectively. So like I said, clarifying the conditions of satisfaction, thinking together, giving space for your performer to decline. So this is one that I see a lot as well, and particularly as everything is ramping up, people need to have space to say, no, I can't take this on. Because a lot of the time we see people consistently saying, yes, 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 no problem, I'll take that, not delegating everything. And then this is where some of the delays come from. Or if you can't fully decline, to make counter offers. So another one, managing progress on commitments effectively. So this is what we see on the ground. So once we've done all that, we've made requests, we've made promises, we've committed to each other, we're going to do something. It doesn't just stop there. We want to keep on top of that, keep talking about it, going back to renegotiate if something goes wrong, keeping your customer updated, you know, asking for help or offering help when it's needed. Similarly, managing completion of commitments effectively. So like I said, quadrant 4 is very often missed, that acknowledgement and feedback loop. It's, you know, here's your report, thanks a mil, that's where it ends, you know. So pushing, and it's upskilling, it upskills people when you share feedback and when you ask for feedback, when you hear whether or not your customer is satisfied or dissatisfied, it helps you going into the future. And another one, and this is slightly more difficult when we're on the ground, takes a lot of coaching, but acknowledging broken commitments and assessing what their consequences, what that means, and taking care of the project. It's not all, it is personal, but it's also not personal, you know. At the core of everything we're thinking about, you know, this is for the project here. And if someone has broken a commitment to you, there might be distrust moving forward then. And instead of brushing it under the carpet and never talking about it again, but then subsequently never asking that person to do something again because you don't trust them, what we say is hash it out, have the conversation, talk about why you might not trust them in the future. And again, it just helps with that constant upskilling, that feedback loop. So again, I'm kind of touched on some of this, but what we say is productivity obviously is about tackling waste, and a lot of what is spoken about and what I'm sure the audience will be very familiar with is the physical waste. So there's lots of lean waste cutting principles and like defects, transportation, inventory. We know all of this. What Vision really focus on is the coordination and the behavioral waste. So weak commitments between each other, saying that, oh, I'll get that to you by the end of the week. End of the week comes, isn't done. I'll get it to you next week. Unclear request. Can you do this for me? Yeah, sure. The person sitting there and a week goes by and they're still no clear on actually what they need to be doing. Breakdowns in trust, like I said, it's something that happens. It's something that's not talked about a lot, but breakdowns in trust do happen when a commitment isn't fulfilled and someone has asked you to do something specific. If you haven't had the conversation around why it hasn't been done and where you could improve, you won't go to that person again and ask them to do something. So that breakdown in trust, you're cutting out someone, you're essentially losing a resource. So what we say, that's a huge amount of waste. Delayed decision making, again, probably isn't new to anyone, but this constant, you know, let's have a meeting about a meeting about a meeting before anyone comes to a decision. Repeat or reworking, we see this a lot particularly in the design space, not so much in construction at the moment, but the repeat and rework and back to the drawing board, there's a lot of waste in that. Too many checkers is another one we see a lot in public companies. So obviously you have to follow process, and you have to have, good processes and good practices of, people signing off these construction projects. But you can also see it spiral into having, 5, 6, 7. In some of the projects, you can have up to 10 people at different levels checking and signing off these designs before they go to construction. And it's very wasteful. That, like, some of the time spent in that 8-10 weeks, like, could be completely cut down, we say. Again, what I've touched on is unproductive meetings and poor moods. So something that Vision focus on, which is a little bit different to other consulting companies, is mood. So it sounds a little bit weird, and especially when we're coming into construction companies, they're like, why are they asking me about my mood or talking about my mood? But what we say is mood is hugely powerful in getting construction finished quicker, getting design finished quicker. It also, when the mood is negative, that is going to delay projects. So if you're in any sort of restrictive mood, if you're in resignation, if you're in frustration, it's very hard to get anything done. And a lot of the time we see resignation in particular of, it has always taken us this long. It will always be like this. Nothing will ever change. And you can see even in the way I'm saying that, and I see you smirking there, like, that is completely unproductive. It's impossible if you're sitting in that space to do better, to push forward. So we use mood as an indicator of, okay, what's the culture like at the minute? How do we shift the mood into, I'm really ambitious, I'm really determined to get this done. When someone's sitting there and they're in that mood and they're looking at a problem, it is so much easier to brainstorm, to tackle, to resolve. Whereas if someone's sitting there saying, things will never change, this problem is too huge, I can't do anything about it, you can see where the challenge lies. So we say that's a huge area that we can work on. And again, something that I think everyone has come across at some point, this working in silos. So again, particularly in the public companies, you're broken down into, oh, that's gone off to procurement, there's nothing I can do. That's a completely separate department to mine. Also, when you're working with delivery partners, instead of having a one team approach, it's very much like, that's gone to the designer, or that's gone to the construction company, or that's gone to the subby, whatever, can't do anything about it. And something we focus on in every project is creating a sort of one team culture. We would say a win is if you can come into the room and you can't differentiate between what company everyone works for, we've won. We're sucking diesel. We're getting on with it, because that's really where we want to be, breaking down those silos. So, like I said, that's really our focus, is driving out the coordination waste, and that's our bread and butter. And I just go on to the next slide. Okay, so again, what we say we would say that 70% of where we can get this change is through the people, and 30% through the process. And a lot of consultancies focus on process, and we do too, to an extent, but you can over focus on, if we create a new SOP, everything will be resolved and, it will be great. But unless you change the people, and unless you change the behavior of the organization, having the best process in the world isn't going to help you achieve it 100%. So we combine CBM, commitment-based management, with Lean and with Project 13 principles, and use this integrated approach to transform the people by building their ambition and their skills, transforming processes, which is important, and it's that simplification, it's removing waste and having clear accountability. So like that, we want to reduce down the amount of checkers, we want to reduce this working in silos so that everyone's together around a table. And we have what we call a network of commitments. So like I said earlier in the presentation, you're making commitments to each other. You've a performer, you've customers, you'll have hundreds, especially you could have thousands if it's a massive project, of commitments to each other. And that network is really important, because I can't fulfill my commitment to you, say, if you haven't fulfilled your commitment to the other person. And we say that managing that and having that really clear, who's responsible for what, where the dependencies are, it's really important. And then we also transform practices. So again, well-defined roles and conversations to produce the desired outcome. So knowing exactly who's responsible for what and what conversations need to happen so that things actually get done. So I'm going to talk through a little bit of a real life example to kind of come. A lot of this is quite theoretical, so I wanted to put in something. It's a project I'm very passionate about, the WINEP 5 project with Severn Trent, MWH Treatment and Stantec. So the overall goal for us on this project was to get to site in half the time and to get off site 20% quicker. So what we promised, like I said, 50% less time construction in 20% less time. And how we're doing this is by applying our core approach, commitment-based management, and implementing key changes in the practices that they're doing to significantly improve their collaboration. So what we've committed is to complete all 5 of the projects in the WINEP 5 program in 2 years. And that's a year saving off the overall program. And this is a really, really important pilot to Severn Trent and to MWH and Stantec, because in the UK, moving into the AMP8 cycle, there's a huge challenge ahead of them. There's a lot of work to be done with a severe lack of resources. So we're trying to show a proof of concept on this project of how we can move faster without putting additional stress, without squeezing people harder, but just by cutting out particularly that coordination waste that I went through. And so that's really important to prove that proof of concept. It's also important because if we do move faster and if we do hit these targets, then it frees up resources to do more projects, obviously. It also helps the supply chain, again, to deliver those AMP8 targets. And really importantly, and like you said in my introduction there, Derek, it improves relationships and it improves the mood through all this collaboration. As we're moving faster and we're seeing that we can achieve this, the resignation is slowly going away and this ambition is being replaced, so the people are really determined and they're excited to come into work. This is something different. So really passionate about that part. So some of the ways that CBM shows up actually on the ground and some of the organizational practices that we implement. So we do collaborative working. So this is what I was saying about breaking down the silos. We weekly on a Wednesday get together. We facilitate a session between MWH, between Stantec and Severn Trent, all of us in the same room, and we're talking through our issues. We're coming to resolution on them. We're building relationships and building trust because we're around the table. We're getting to know each other. You know what I mean? It's not just very transactional emails back and forth. We're working together all as one team. We've one shared plan. So we run pull planning workshops on those collaborative sessions on a Wednesday. Engaging everyone who needs to be there, of course, and defining those key milestones and promoting accountability. So that's where a lot of the commitments would show up in that shared plan. When we're going through it, obviously we're pull planning it, we're trying to get dates, but we're not just leaving it at that. We're assigning customers to each task. So we're putting our senior project manager as the customer for these milestones. Make sure you're making offers to him, make sure that he's making clear requests to the rest of his team to ensure that all of these things are being met. We also have a daily huddle. So again, this is a vision practice that we implement on almost every project. 15 minutes at the start of the day. It's similar to an agile stand-up, but more focused on the commitments and just addressing the concerns, maintaining progress. Like I said earlier, effectively managing commitments is as important as making strong commitments. So that's really what the daily huddle focuses on. again, you've heard me use this customer term, and it's something that we really highlight in all of our projects, is this customer focused mindset. So every single task will have a customer, to ensure that there's clarity in all the expectations, and that there's someone to negotiate with. If something can't be done, someone owns this task, so you can go back to them, you can ask for help, you can counter offer, etc. And another thing that we do is this rapid issue resolution. So we always enroll the senior decision makers. It's a red flag if we don't have senior decision makers in fortnightly, monthly, whatever the cadence may be. If we don't have them in to quickly come to resolution on issues, your project's in real trouble. So enrolling them is really something that we spend a lot of time and energy on. And whether that be in a fortnightly steering meeting, or we have a practice that we call come into resolution, and it's quite a structured practice where we'll take an issue that is potentially sitting for too long on a slide deck in to do, and we'll get around the table. We'll get the people who really need to be in the room to make the decision in the room, instead of back and forth emails. And we'll get a proposer to propose the solution. Everyone will comment on it. But at the start of the meeting, we will have agreed that by the end of this meeting, because everyone who needs to be here is here, we'll have a resolution. So that's one of the practices that we do on the ground as well. Again, this is specifically for WinUp 5. So I've talked through a lot of this, the co-location days. What that would normally look like is we'll start off by doing a bit of a 4-week look ahead on the 5 projects. We use a Miro board for all of this. And then we'll do a look back, make sure that everyone's fulfilled the commitments that they need to fulfill, and that what was going to be done is done. We have our huddles every day. We also have collaboration sessions. So this is with the lads on site, with our site managers and our foremen, and if there's subbies there, we'll get them into, and we do that weekly, on site, one per project, if you get me. So once a week we go to every site and we do this. And similarly, we do pull planning. We do a 4-week look ahead and review the past week, but specific to that project. When we're together, we do all 5, but these collaboration sessions with the lads on site is just specific to theirs. I've talked through coming to resolution. So we do that as and when required, when we have some big issues that come up. And we have leadership calls, again, like I said, we meet fortnightly on this specific project to get that senior support and the buy-in to our 20% faster ambition. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact. I've talked a lot about CBM, but using all of this, what we see is that you can really accelerate your project timelines. So you can get projects reaching site 50% quicker. You can get them off site 20% faster. You can break down these silos. You can have people come into a room and say, I don't know who works for who, they're teams who were once really separated are now working together as one unit, one team, sharing knowledge, sharing best practice with each other, which is better for the industry overall, the whole construction industry. And you get that cultural transformation. So you get the shift from skepticism to confidence, and you get the shift from resignation to ambition. And people feel real pride and ambition when this happens. Like I said, they want to come to work. They're excited about what they're doing. And we're reinforcing this belief that this faster project progress is actually achievable, and not through making people double their workload. It's through cutting out this waste. So that's really important for us. And just so we're still in the project at the minute, but to highlight some of the results specifically on this WinUp 5 project. So our Mattersea Thorpe, we got to site 41% quicker. Edwinstowe 34 and Retford 19. Again, we didn't necessarily hit 50%, but our senior directors were sitting there being like, we have never even hit 2%. Like, this is amazing, And again, we always like to put in a target. We like to have a quick, snappy 20% faster, 50% faster, whatever it is. But really, it's about just doing something different and proving you can do something different to get the cultural shift and the transformation, behavioral change that we need. And for our construction, we're doing really well at the minute. We're in the middle of it, so we only have projected time saves, but as it stands, we've got Mattersea at 28, Edmonstowe at 27, and Retford at 20. And the other two sites are just about to start construction. So there are some real life results. And then I've just put in a couple of quotes so that you know I'm not making all of this up, right? So we did a bit of a lessons learned when we got halfway through the project, and as part of it, we wanted to get some feedback. And we got really, really positive feedback. So on the knowledge sharing, everyone was really, really keen that what we're doing here needs to be rolled out across the whole company. This is just a batch of 5 projects, but they want it everywhere. The team spirit, like I said, this hasn't felt like 3 different companies working on a project, that's huge for me. I think that's one of my favorite ones, because I think when you're all working together instead of he said, she said, or they said, and we don't agree, it makes coming to work just more fun, more enjoyable, more exciting. Collaborative transformation. So one of our lads said this is the best project that he's been involved in from a collaboration standpoint, and accelerated progress. So like I said, this, as in getting the full design complete ahead of construction, has never been done before in MWH. It's insane that we're on site for 3 projects already. So on those 3 projects, what we've done, like, it's a full design package signed off and ready to construct, as opposed to kind of in a lot of places you'd phase it, and in a lot of their other projects it might be for the PST over here, you might have your drawings, but you're waiting for your TSR drawings, whatever it is. This is a full design package. So that was something that hadn't been done before. And that's me. So just wanted to say thank you for listening to me, Derek, and happy to answer any questions that I hope you might have.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. That was fantastic. Big high level, but really brought it down to that practical level in terms of what the outcomes can be.
Yeah.
I think you really hammered it home in terms of the opportunities are not by making people work hard or go faster or anything like that. It's actually that looking at the non-value and waste, and some of the really it's look around the corners as well and see where the opportunities are.
Yeah.
There's a lot in it. Fair play to you. One of the kind of, as we were going through it, we're talking about good conversations and so on. And I'm always minded of the George Bernard Shaw quote that says the biggest illusion about communication, or the biggest thing about the misinterpretation about communication, is the illusion that it has taken place.
Yeah.
So it's that. But you brought that back to just clearly defining the customer versus the performer side. And maybe that's something I'd go back to that conversation loop, and maybe back to the concept a little bit is great. You have it down, but getting started, walking in day one into a group, and you were talking about these moods as well. I really want to dig into the mood piece, but you talked about resignation. Sometimes there's a mood of comfort. This is the way we've done it. The organization, we know how to build. We've done it in the past. We just want to do the same on this project again, and we've made our margin as well as a business. So why change it? Why upset? So I suppose we know ultimately as people who go in and support teams what the outcome can be. But when you're part of that team at the start, how do you actually get started? How do you build the trust? You talk about mistrust as well. How do you get that? How do you initially get it off the ground?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of the things that I spoke about. I would first be focusing on the mood. So a lot of the time when we're coming in, obviously there's something that has happened that has provoked the company to get consultants in. And like, it could be a challenge, it could be, I'm getting pressure from the CEO, it could be an industry challenge. And what we like to do is take that challenge initially and turn it into an opportunity. So you have to get people not fully there, because you're not going to in the first few weeks, but just in some way, shape or form, building a mood of some ambition around this opportunity or this challenge that's been put in front of them. That's the key thing at the start. Like you said, these lads have been doing it, and the women as well have been doing it for years. They know how to do it. So we need to like get a little bit of a bite on, okay, I can see that this is in front of us. I can see that there's some sort of challenge here. So I'll bite. I'll see if we can potentially change. And a lot of the time they do, like, the building and the designing is their bread and butter, but I don't think anyone would sit there and say everything's perfect and nothing needs to change. There's always gripes, there's always frustrations. And a lot of the time when we first come in, we also try and pick up on a few of those, we've always done it this way with the procurement system, say, and it wrecks my head. We'll try and find little things like that we can like quickly resolve, just to gain a little bit of trust and say, oh, okay, maybe we can do things a little bit differently. So we start off with, what's the one useful thing that I can do to get people bought into what we're trying to do here? And slowly but surely, once you do 1 or 2 or 3 of these things, then trust builds up, ambition builds up. And then you can kind of hit them with some of the harder stuff of, okay, now that we've got you slightly dipping your toe in the water, here's a bit more about CBM, here's the loop. We're on site with them as well. So when someone makes a request, we do, like, majority of our coaching would be just in the moment coaching. So my SPM might say, oh, John, can you do that? Yeah, no worries. And then I'll be jumping in, and they're sick of me at this point, but I'll jump in and say, when do you need that by? How do you want it done? And I help them in that way and do that sort of in the moment coaching. And slowly but surely, as you're getting into the project, you have to do it less and less. Not just because I'm glaring at them and they know I'm going to ask them anyway, but because we're just sitting beside them and just making sure that everything that they're saying is clear and that there's no confusion and they're making commitments to each other. They start to pick it up more.
Yeah, that's good. I'll come back to that as well. I'll just go back to the moods piece.
Yeah.
Classification. How do you classify what the mood is, or is it just a sense of what the mood is, or how do you rate a mood, or and so on? And I'll put this in the context of even large scale capital projects. You have new teams, you have new people joining and leaving the whole time, but even a project might be 1, 2, 3 years at the most. So it's that Tuckman model of team development kind of piece. How do you get started again with that, and how do you classify the mood, or is there a way to classify the moods?
The way that I classify it is, so moods and emotions are different, right? Emotions, and that's where a lot of the confusion, I think, kind of comes from. An emotion you'll have about something. You might be nervous to do a task, or you might be happy that you're going to have a glass of wine after work. They're kind of quicker. A mood is something it's there, it's longer, it's bigger, it's not just a fleeting feeling. We classify them as expansive and restrictive moods. So the restrictive moods, like I said, would be resignation, frustration, arrogance, that sort of thing. And the expansive moods would be ambitious, curious, so we split them into that sort of thing. And why we use those words expansive and restrictive is because, when you're in an expansive mood, opportunities are easier to see, possibilities are easier to see, solutions are easier to come to. And when you're in the restrictive moods, your sight is restricted. It's too difficult. When I'm that frustrated, I can barely hear you, so it's and I don't want to sound like too hippy dippy when I'm talking about this, but it's an overall sense. It's a culture, it's a behavior. It's not just a quick feeling that you might have about a task in front of you.
Yeah, and I suppose what I hear a little bit in terms of that is that growth mindset versus closed mindset kind of stuff. Is that
exactly?
It's same.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good. And again, an awful lot of the problems that we come back, or where we see challenges, is in the planning and that preparation piece. And going back to your conversation up here, the outcome of poor planning, poor preparation, is that we tend to go over time, over budget, and so on.
Yeah.
So do in that very initial phase, do you call the customer, and do you call the performer, or how do you communicate? How do you tell who's who and what's expected of them at the very start so that they do start to perform?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, like that's the terminology that we use in Vision. But if you're in an organization and they want to call it an owner and an action owner and I don't know, you know what I mean? It's just terminology at that point. But
Yes, yeah,
what we say is every single action has someone who is, or sorry, every single request, it has someone who's making the request. Whatever you want to call them that, but we refer to them as the customer of the request. And every request will have someone performing it. Again, it's just that's the terminology we use. It's different in every project as well. If an organization's really, really, really bought into commitment-based management, because like I said at the very, very start, commitment-based management has a lot of academic background. There's a lot of theory, and some organizations will be far more interested in that theory, and we can use a lot of the terminology. In some other projects, particularly with the construction lads on site, like, I can't be saying all of this because they're like, what is she talking about? You have to translate it to what works for them. As long as you're keeping the core of what we're trying to do and the methodology there, I'm not too precious on the ground of what we actually use the terms wise. But yeah, and I think just on your point of the poor planning, when we're using the customer and performers, what we're trying to do at the start, and it might seem really complex because it's, millions of pounds, millions of euros in design. But if you have a customer who's making a really strong request of, this is exactly what I need you to do, a performer who's asking the questions, do you want it done this way? How do you want it uploaded? How much time and energy and resource should I be putting on this? Getting those conditions of satisfaction really clear at the start of the planning process. Like that's where we're using commitment-based management. It's also making commitments, it's renegotiating, it's going back to your customer at all times to keep them in the loop of what's going on. And that's where we can save a lot of the waste, instead of it just, here's a project and then I'm not going to talk to you until I'm signing off your proposal. It's that back and forth, consistently checking in with your customer that can cut out a lot of the delays,
Yeah. I suppose the lean term that is used is that reliable promise kind of piece, which is that your commitment and reaffirming that is going to happen, and taking time to reaffirm that is going to happen as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned Project 13 principles as well. Can you just elaborate on what Project 13 principles are?
So commitment-based management is in itself its own methodology, but we blend it with Project 13 principles. We blend it with Agile, we blend it with Lean. There's a lot of, it's like I was saying, a lot of it is terminology. It's a lot of what we're Project 13, if what they're doing is what we're doing, and we're just calling it different things. So it's more the point of, we're saying CBM, but it's a blend of all these things, and it's a blend of what those methodologies are trying to do, but layering it with commitments and layering it with care and layering it with clear conditions of satisfaction. So using all of those principles in addition to commitment-based management. And a lot of the time, especially in these big, public companies, you might have 2 or 3 consultants in at the same time on a project, all using different, one could be a lean specialist, you'd have an agile coach over here, and then you've us coming in using commitment-based management. And I think everyone is essentially trying to do the same thing, it's just blending it all together. And our focus, like I've gone through, is taking all the principles in Agile, Lean, Project 13, whatever it may be, and layering it with commitments and the loop and moods in particular as well.
Yeah. it's kind of, I just said that is there an alignment piece then between all the different consultants coming in? Are we sure that the communication is right there?
Yeah.
So yeah, very good. One of the things as well is you mentioned in terms of the structure that you go to sites, you do your pull plans and so on. But you did mention Miro. Do you actually physically do those plans and bring everybody into the room, or do you use technology? Do you use Teams or Zoom, or how does that actually work?
Yeah.
Because again, I'll just put a little bit of context, is that reliable commitment. It's that person in the room. It's actually people talking to each other, maybe trying to figure something out in the background. If you're planning to do a piece of work, well, I would plan to do that. And you're going, well, you can't get in there because I have a crane there, or whatever the challenge is.
Yeah.
How do you manage that, or how does that work?
So it's a bit of a blend of both. So we have in our sites cabins, we have whiteboards with sticky notes on it, and we get the lads in when we're doing those collaborative sessions. We get the lads in, we stand around the board and tick it off. There's nothing better than pen and paper, as everyone says, you know what I mean? And that would be quite a detailed look of exactly what's going on site, like you said, what equipment's where, what do we need to order, what areas blocked off, whatever. So our collaborative boards would be pen and paper and post-its and very, very detailed. And then when we get the management team, we call them, it's like the PMs, the SPMs, the project engineers. When we get together with them, what we do is we use Miro to be a sort of a higher level version of the CP boards that we have on sites. So again, we're sitting around the table and we just have the big screen up and we use Miro. So we're still, together and we're in person, have the conversations, but we'll use Miro because then in our daily huddles, we can pull up the Miro that we've done on our Wednesday session and just check it off if we need to, So it's a bit of a blend of both, to be honest with you. It's
how important, I suppose, as somebody who's involved with teams day in, day out, is it to have people in the room? Because we look to technology, and sometimes it's not possible, particularly with design teams who might be very remote, might be in a different country, so they're always going to be online or whatever. From if maybe it's an impossible question, but what's the best blend, or how does it always work best if people come physically to a space, or do you need to have that as a launch of a at the project, and then when people get to know each other, you can work remotely? Or have you any sense of what works well there?
I think you've touched on it a little bit. I think it's absolutely key at the beginning of anything to get together and see people face to face and, look them in the whites of their eyes and see, are they as committed as I am? I think that's absolutely essential. I think in this world, particularly like since COVID, it is, like you said, it's going to be a challenge to get everyone weekly together around a table unless you're very lucky and everyone's, based close together. As much as you can do it, I would say do it, because I think for me, I've worked in many, many companies. Some of them have done it fully remote and some of them have done it, fully on site. And you can see the value in being able to turn your head and ask someone a question instead of, ringing, not getting answered, sending an email, not getting answered, that sort of thing. So just the speed of, that sort of thing. And then I would say, whenever we have a particularly large issue come up, we always try to get around the table. We'll prioritize it to say, let's actually sit down together here. We have a huge challenge in front of us. And it's part of that mood piece as well, because when you're sitting at home in your home office or whatever, and there's this huge thing that's come up, it can be quite isolating. And when you're already in a mood of, overwhelm, and you're looking at this and you're just closing your laptop, if you can get around a table and everyone's in the same headspace of this is a big challenge, it's much easier to shift into, okay, this is a big challenge, but look, we're all here together. Let's try and resolve it. So I would say, if you can't do it weekly, at least at the start of a project, and particularly when you have something particularly challenging come up, it's really key.
Yeah, I think that point is very important, particularly when there's a big issue comes up, because people get under pressure.
Exactly.
They might write an email in a particular tone, or might be perceived to be in a particular tone that isn't meant. And if you're sitting at home after receiving an email and it's maybe not so, it can be very isolating, and you can interpret. that getting together piece is very important, I feel, as well.
Definitely.
You mentioned rapid issue resolution or rapid problem solving or whatever it is. Big part of the last planner system, Pull Plans, is that constraints. Do you track those constraints anyway, or do you just try and resolve them all in the moment and they're never tracked? Or how does that actually work?
No, we do track them. So we have on each of the boards on site. I'm talking like as well from the project just because I'm on it at the minute, but we do this on all of our projects. So
Yes, yeah.
on our boards, we would have the list of issues or awaiting decisions log, we call it, like, and we'll have a customer performer for each task. We'll also have updates on, with dates on it. This week, this happened, next week, or this happened, blah, blah, blah. And we'll also be sure to, when we do close off the task, put the date down so that we can measure how long this issue took to resolve. When I'm talking about that rapid resolution, and coming to resolution, it would be something that's sitting on our waiting decision log for 4 or 5 weeks. Every week the update is kind of the same. When it gets to that, that's when we do this. Okay, we're getting everyone around the table here. We're going to prepare in advance, make sure that, if a process engineer needs to be there, then they're being brought in. But we're coming together on a resolution for this, and we'll put forward a proposal. We'll have a decision maker, and we'll have anyone else there who needs to give input or answer questions. So it would be more, we don't just, promote, rapid decide. It's more around when something's just been sitting on a log for too long and it just feels stuck. And again, it's part of that mood piece, because it can that you can slowly start slipping into like frustration, like this is never going to get resolved. And we try to nip that in the bud as much as possible, So that's when we use that practice.
So you have the challenge of getting to site 50% faster and completing 30% faster, getting through the program.
Yeah.
Just giving an example, I'm not critical, but giving an example of a couple of jobs that you're on, haven't quite got there in 50%. 50%. Where do you think the opportunities are? If we're to accept, where's the next step? Because it's a big thing about this is all continuous improvement in pursuit of perfection, if you want to talk about it in that sense. But where's the next iteration in terms of improvements, or from the learnings that you've had from other projects, where do you think the biggest opportunity is?
I think a part of it for me, and I don't want to blame everyone else outside of the project, but a part of it is enrolling teams further. So we have not very small, but we have a small enough project team that is really enrolled in this goal of getting to site quicker. But as I mentioned at the very start, that's senior director buy-in, that's stakeholder buy-in. And when you get it, particularly in public companies, like, I think the opportunity for me is in some of those like internal teams of, procurement or HR, like when it comes to like hiring someone, like there's little things I think that if you enrolled the target out into the wider organization, I think there's huge opportunities there, because then you'll have everyone sort of being really ambitious. Whereas at the moment, we were a small enough project team competing against, very delayed other projects and other priorities from other people, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's that sort of large scale enrollment that I think I'd love to go after, particularly in the internal teams, because a lot of the time as consultants we're brought into like a project team, but there's a lot of work that could also be done, and all of this that I spoke about can be applied to your HR practices, your procurement practices, whatever it is,
Yes, yeah.
And so I think there's huge opportunity there that could really help in striving for excellence, as you say.
And I think that's actually a very interesting one. It's something we often think about capital project delivery as actually just the delivery of the physical piece.
Yeah.
But there's such the integration of all functions within lots of different businesses to bring it together. And I suppose that's what we're all at, that continuous improvement, or it's a journey that we're always on. It never ends, and organizations like yourself can move to the next level and bring organizations to the next level. And that's that external thinking as well. When you're involved in the project, you tend to get focused, and having some external eyes on the project can be really, really beneficial to say, well, we've achieved that, but what's next? You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So fantastic. Yeah, could talk to you all day on this kind of stuff. It's very interesting. It's a whole specialism in itself, but
Yeah.
not. It's something that can be honed. I think, even though it is a specialism, we do a lot of it. It's about really driving it on, and learning more and more about it. So I encourage people who watch this to dip into it more and more. But I think
Definitely.
we'll leave it at that for today, Holly. Maybe we'll get you back again for further conversation on some of the particular aspects. The moods piece is very interesting.
Definitely. Yeah.
How we change them, etc. So listen, sincere thanks, Holly. Very insightful, very engaging presentation and conversation. From an LCI point of view, we have more resources, including further webinars, our annual conference, our annual book of cases and updates. For other updates, please look at our leanconstructionireland.ie website, and follow and like our Lean Construction Ireland LinkedIn group. This webinar will also be available on our LCI LinkedIn and YouTube channels, so please subscribe and like those. Thanks again for watching. We look forward to seeing you in some upcoming events. Thank you very much.